the North Bennington Graded School Prudential Committee for October 15th, 2020. And that's the call to order. I don't see any public. Tim Newbold's here, so I'll admit him.
It's the 14th, Ray, just to be clear.
Oh, it's the 14th. I'm sorry. Yep. Good catch.
Well, Kiernan caught that. You didn't hear him, though.
No, I didn't hear him. So the 14th, excuse me. I see no public. So we'll move on to finance, but Mary is not here.
Well, she's coming because I sent her the link. So.
Okay. So, shall we wait a second? A minute? We could skip to the consent agenda, but if we wish. And the consent agenda includes, I'll skip the bills, most of which are to the SVSU, an installment on our assessments, Catamount Access TV, monthly fee for that, Lori for board minutes, the village school for $169,000 for October. South Shore Community School had an additional student that came in last month after our paying the warrant last month. So there's a tuition for that student, 1 quarter of the tuition, and then a couple of payments to the Village of North Bennington for money that we owe them from taxes that have arrived in Mary's keeping, I believe. Okay. So, and then there are the minutes from last month. So that's the consent agenda. And I'd accept a motion or solicit a motion to approve them.
So moved.
Second. Thank you, Kiernan and Matt. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Raise your hand or say aye. Aye. Okay, that's all of us. So, Mary here yet? No. We'll move on. There are no policies. The superintendent is ill, and so he's not available for the meeting. So we'll skip that. And that's going to make this a very short meeting, actually. So we'll skip to the chair's report. And so, our summer facility work for 2021 basically boils down to the essential maintenance practices on the rest of the cornice work at the building and the roof. I think, contrary to what I said previously, I think we can do both of them as just solicit bids from at least 3 contractors who are qualified to do the work and make a decision based on that, assuming that we have specifications that are the same for all of them to work from. And instead of not have a very formal bidding process like we did on the bond in 2011. I don't think we need it. I don't think it has to be that way, and we won't necessarily get any more bids than doing it that way than we would just calling people up and asking them to look at our what we need to do and giving us a price. Currently, we have Doxy Roofing is going to be working on a price for the roof, and just I'll ask Tim here a question. Did they come and work on the roof today to repair that spot, Tim?
Yeah, so they were there this morning, and they repaired around the vent that had deteriorated. And it basically looks like it's somewhat of a low spot in the roof, so the
Yeah.
water sits there a little more.
Right.
So it just deteriorated a little more quickly than the rest of the roof. But they did that repair today.
Great.
And so that went pretty smoothly, I think, overall.
Great. That's terrific. So I think it might be useful to have an architect give us a spec for the membrane roof, but I know we have one from the renovations in '96. So I was going to look in that specification book, which I think is in Tim's possession, and copy that, and then review it with we've used Ryan Garibaldi at Centerline, and if he doesn't want to do it, we could go maybe talk to Mike Baker, who actually probably worked on those specs back in '96 when he was working with John Traver and on that project. So once that's done, I think we could send those out to identified bidders possibilities. So we need concurrently to be checking with contractors we know of who could take on that project to see if to secure their willingness to at least look at it and tell us whether they could give us a price, or if they don't have time to do it, whatever, and give them a time frame of next summer after school's out till the beginning of school in
Right, to get a
year.
handle or to get ahead of it.
Yep.
If you can find those specs, is there any reason those wouldn't be satisfactory?
I don't think there would be, but I want to, it is 25 years later. I'd like to see if there's any reason to change it. Usually they're kind of boilerplate, but I don't know. I don't remember if there were materials specified in it or not, in which case there might be changes because technology moves on everything. So that's what I'm going to look at and show to Ryan. Maybe give him the sheet that shows the roof plan again and see what he says. As far as the E&P work, I think I more or less did a spec for this past summer, and I think we could just clean that up a little bit and identify the new parts of the work to do, the final parts, which would be the north end and the west end and the oldest part of the south end of cornice and frieze on the building. We will also have to get someone to take down the gutters in order for the painters to work on it. I figure it's easier if we get the contractor who put those gutters up. That would be Vermont Roofing Company. And we could invite them to bid. Doxy is providing a bid, and if we can find at least one more contractor to give us a bid, I think we'd be in business. And that's up in the air. There is Pinnacle in North Adams, is it? And then there's a contractor that we heard of from Tom Martin that he had.
Carruthers,
Yep,
and I've got his contacts. We can,
yep,
if we have something, we can send it out to him.
yep. So that's kind of what I'm planning. I guess I think I'll just get on it instead of leading it to the new year. Try to move forward, see if we can't snag ourselves people committed to the jobs by the new year or shortly thereafter. If that's okay with everybody, is that the consensus of the board? We
Yes.
don't need to vote on it. I just think we would just say that that's the way we want to proceed and move forward with it. Yeah, sorry, I muted it. Sorry. Telephone. Student counts. I don't know what the village school count is yet. The count for students attending the SVUESD schools is 15. We have 11 at South Shore, and we have 7 at Highland Hall, or 32, which is an increase of about 12 or 13 from last year. So some growing pains there for us. And I expect that Tammy will be able to get me a spreadsheet on students at the village school. She said she was going to work on it Thursday. So
I think we're still holding steady at 110.
110. Okay. Good. So that's 142 plus the PreK students. And I sent out a sheet with all the PreK numbers, which Lori will hopefully go over and tell us whether there's anybody missing. But there's 21 on there. Let's see if I can find that sheet.
Ray, am I correct in saying that you said there were 12 new students in
I think so. It's 32, and last year we had 19 or 20 for the cohort that's going to Highland Hall, South Shore, and Shaftesbury, Bennett, this year Bennell, and Molly Stark.
So they new residents?
Some of them are new residents, yes. Some of them are new at the college. Some are new elsewhere. And then we have a list of 3, 6, 9, 10, 15, 18, 21 students on here for PreK. And as I recall, let's see, they list on this 1, 2, 3. There are only 4 of them shown as going to the village school. So Lori?
Mary's coming, and I'm sorry I didn't hear what you said because Mary was just calling.
Okay, so what I said was that the list I have for PreK students,
Yeah, there's some.
21, but only, what did I say, 1, 2, 3, only 4 of them on here are listed as village school attendees.
There's some errors on that, and since I got
Okay.
that from you, I haven't had time to
Okay,
respond.
all right.
What another issue with that is, Ray, is that several of them have signed up and they chose not to send their child out
Oh,
of home.
yeah.
But I
They
can
just
indicate
kept the child home. Right.
they kept the
Okay.
child home. So I'll indicate that when I go over the list.
Okay, that's part of why I send it out. You know, I need to check it anyway, and you're the person to check it because you know all these kids. So I don't. So I thank you for that.
Sure.
Are there families in the parent development yet?
I saw last weekend they were having an open house and people trying to get people to apply. I think they've been doing that for a bit. I don't know what's going on there. What? Sorry,
I
Karen?
don't think anybody's moved in yet, though.
Yeah, that's my impression. I think that's coming up, but hasn't happened yet.
I think November is when it starts, I think.
Okay.
I think.
So I have, because I don't have fixed figures here, I don't really have a comparison to last year, but I would say we're higher. And I know we're higher. So that will help our equalized pupil count in the long run. Help it this year, although we only get about half of the increase right this year because of the way the state averages things.
And
One other point. The other issue with the equalized pupil count is the cert rate for the village school, which last year was low at the time that it was submitted, I guess, or that they put into our calculation. So we got sort of we lost a little bit of ground due to that, because ultimately a lot of kids showed up who were certified. As I recall, the list expanded after that point. So I don't know whether Tim knows that information yet. Probably not. But
and where does the 110 sit with regard to our tuition agreement?
that's what we're paying on right now, 110. So it would be unchanged unless there is an additional student or someone leaves by the time October 19th happens.
I'm just wanting to be reminded what we settled on in that agreement for range and
Our total is actually settled at 114, but we agreed to pay on 110 at the start of the year. And that's what Tim is saying. It's hanging at 110. Correct, Tim?
We haven't gone above the cap or below the.
Yeah, no, we're not.
I think we're in the what we're
sweet
hoping is
spot.
the sweet spot.
Yeah,
so to
at
speak.
the moment. Yeah. So do
Um,
you know about cert rate or anything, Tim?
No, we don't have that information yet because of the whole. Because they've extended free lunches to everybody
Yes.
across the state.
Yeah.
We've sort of that paperwork has all been delayed, so we're now collecting it. So we'll slowly collect that, and then we'll see where we are.
Okay.
But the direct cert rate is slow in coming this year because of all the other things that are going on. But as soon as we have that, we can pass that on.
Maybe
and then the housing project, from what I understand, there's a waiting list right now, but no one has moved in. But my understanding is there's about 6 or 7 kids in our age range on the lists as it stands right now. Whether they will actually decide to transfer to us when they make the official move, that's still up in the air. But I think that's where we are roughly at this point.
And that could mean either, well, it means because they've changed residency that they become members of our district.
They're eligible, yes.
Yeah, and we're going to end up getting those numbers in addition. Would you mind explaining the cert rate to the board and anybody who might be watching this or?
So what Ray is talking about is from my understanding is students that are under the direct certification category, which means they're getting free and reduced lunch, or they are part of the SNAP program, or they're getting support from the state in other ways. And if they're in that category, from what I understand, they count more in your per pupil count. So you have sort of the standard number, but if a student has more need, they count a little bit extra.
Yeah.
So that's how that works, is my understanding. And we've hovered around 30%, 35% at different times. We were kissing the 40% mark at one point. If you get over the 40% mark, that's when a whole nother level of support kicks in, and that's free and reduced lunch for everybody. So we've been kissing that, but we've never actually crossed that threshold in my time. But I do think that it's been, I think, a huge boon for our community, for a lot of families. The free and reduced lunch program for breakfast and lunch that's happened over the last few weeks and months, that I think I would love for us to and Ray and I have talked about it, and I think I've talked to a couple of you about it, but potentially rejoining with the larger SVSU around the food program so that we can provide that for all of our families. The other schools in the area all fall into that category. The decision was made when the school went independent not to pursue that, or the option was not given to them. But I do think it would be a valuable thing for us to pursue going forward. And this, one of the side effects of this whole thing is we see that it works. They can provide us the lunches from the other schools, which is what they did in the past. So I would be interested in us pursuing that, and I think it would be a combination of the village school and the Prudential committee reaching out to the larger district to see whether we could rejoin that consortium versus being on the outskirts.
Yep. And I, as one of I have an item D under my report called other FY21 tasks, and that's one of those tasks.
Okay. Great.
The one of two, which is to work with Jim and Renee at the supervisory union and get involved in the food service committee and incorporate the village school into it. They already incorporate Sacred Heart, so there is no barrier in the regulations to an independent school or even a parochial school being involved. It's merely a matter of the financial arrangements, I believe. And the other, just to finish that other FY21 task, the other is what I mentioned in the kind of the memo that I sent out, which is the state sort of forced integration of BVSU, the Battenkill Valley Supervisory Union, into the SVSU. And that's got to happen by July 1st of next year. And because there's a non-operating district in BVSU, that's Sandgate, and there's this district, we have different needs, much lesser needs from the supervisory union. So we had North Bennington had worked out an agreement based on a principle of how this would be distributed. A principle that we shouldn't pay for things that we can't even receive, and then the metric was set up in to exclude parts of the services of the supervisory union that we don't receive in from our costs, and to prorate certain costs where it was more appropriate to do that. Sandgate, on the other hand, has a different deal with their supervisor union. They also are a smaller district than we are, I believe. Their total, which is K-12 total, is only 50 or so students. So they have a deal that several years ago, I was told by the chairman at the time, Alan Shorn, that they felt it was a really good deal with BVSU. So they're going to be concerned about that, I would think, just as I'm concerned about our arrangements. And so it has to be worked out. And that's basically a project of mine at the SCSU, I suppose, but I may need support from other people on the board. And I was going to talk with the superintendent tonight about it because I had asked him to specifically speak to the BVSU SCSU merger a little bit, as well as to the COVID elements of what he does, which are most of what's on his plate. But he's ill, so we won't do that tonight. And so we're at almost the end of this agenda, and I had carried over a report from the village school on opening and students, and Tim's here tonight, so I guess if he's willing to do that, I'd entertain his doing that.
So it is, I think this has been a long haul. We're now, I think, in the 7th month of this for us. And I can't say enough about how we transitioned to online learning. And that was sort of emergency work. A lot of planning went into the summer. And then some of the rules were still shifting as we were entering into August. So we were still trying to figure it all out. But I think the school has done a remarkable job in gearing up for this year, and the staff has all rallied around to do an amazing job. Making the plan is one thing, but actually implementing the plan is a completely another thing, and trying to do it in the way they have has been incredible. So I can't say enough about them. But it's been still learning pains, or growing pains, I should say. Or we've been lucky in that we are still in person now after 5 weeks, and we've had a couple of illnesses and things like that gave us a little bit of a scare, but luckily none of it has proven to be COVID related. At one point, we even decided to we had a bout of croup going through a particular group, and we decided to close that group down so that we could clean up. And then when we were in better shape, invited those folks back, and that seemed to work out pretty well. The challenge right now is that every little illness means that people need to stay out of school, and that's really the only way this model works. And it's proving, I think, the right way to do it, but also really challenging, in that it's challenging for families. It's also challenging for us as a staff. There's not a lot of, we don't have many substitutes that we can pull from. So if we have illnesses amongst our staff or their children or their family, basically any illness within a household is basically, the guidance is to quarantine or to stay out of school until you know more. So it makes it really tough to balance all those needs right now. But I think we're doing a great job with it. I think the other challenging part is trying to do in-person and distance learning at the same time. If we were just remote, that would be one model. If we were just in person, that would be another. But trying to work with kids who are in person, and we're well above 90%. When we opened up this fall, we had about 16 or 18 students who opted to be distance learning. More than half of them have decided to be in person because they feel as though the school is doing such a good job. They've joined us in person, but there's still a handful of students outside who are still trying to do the distance learning option, and there's for a variety of reasons. So we want to support those families, but it's a lot of work for the teachers in the classroom, and how do we make that work for them? So I think that's the next struggle, is how to do this in perpetuity, because I do think we're on a good trajectory to continue this for quite a while. But how do we do that successfully is going to be the next piece. The other piece right now is on a call with Dan French today and a couple other heads of schools, and the travel restrictions sound really good on paper, but there's no other institutions except for schools that are actually enforcing them. So there's no government agency, there's no state agency that's actually enforcing the quarantines if you travel. It's now left in the schools to interpret. Okay, you've gone across the state, and we live 5 minutes from the border in New York, and often those counties are yellow or even red sometimes. And how do you enforce that or explain it to families? It's been really challenging. And that's, I think, a challenge that a lot of schools across the state are dealing with. So that's one of the little hiccups in this whole model right now. Going to school or going to work is considered essential, but some of the other activities that people want to engage in sort of fall in that gray area or in a restricted category, and it's tough to explain it to them or have that conversation with them. So I think I am just amazed at everything that everybody has done. I think we can still do it going forward. I do want to try and figure out some things to support everybody involved, because it is a long haul. This is really tiring. Everybody's anxiety level is really high. But I think I can't say enough, and I'm just going to keep echoing it again and again, in how much I feel like the people who work at the village school have done just an amazing job in making that happen. I'm happy to entertain any questions. I think the thing right now is I think there's some conversations around the state to completely go to in-person. I think if we're continuing in the model we're doing, where we have some at home and some in person, we probably still need those Wednesdays. There's just no way that people could do it otherwise. They need a little bit of respite there in the middle to catch up. And we also need it to be able to clean and things like that. But I do think, I heard an analogy today that I guess when you're in a war, in that 6 months, if you're deployed for 6 months, that's when you start to hit the wall. I think we're now in that point that we're now 6 months in or a little bit over that, and we're hitting the wall, that people are just tired from having to, and I mean not just the people in the school, but everybody across the country is hitting that wall of, do we still follow all the rules and the guidance, or do we just say we're done? I think we're hitting sort of a little bit of a low, and we need to figure out how we can stay positive going forward. And I think just the pieces that we're still in person, the kids are still happy, and that's the biggest thing, is the kids have smiles on their faces in school. I mean, as hard as this is, they are happy to be there. And that, I think, is the gift that we keep shooting for, but it's still hard. It's not the same as it's been in the past. So I thank you for your support. I thank everybody at the school for their work, and we'll keep plugging away, and we'll see how we go. I'm still hopeful, but it is tiring. I cannot say how much more tiring this has ever been for everybody involved. And I think the families, the kids, I think the kids are even tired too. You can see it in them, but I think they're glad to be together. Do you have any questions that I can try to answer?
Well, I don't have any.
One question,
Yep, Matt?
is your school calendar changed in any way? When are your breaks? Are they basically as they always were?
Right now, we're sticking with the same breaks. The one thing that I changed as we entered into the start of the year is we had a number of half days on there, and I've eliminated those because of the Wednesday piece. Because a lot of those fell on Fridays, and I didn't want to lose that instructional time, so we sort of dropped those half days off of our calendar for the first half of the year, and it's likely that we'll end up dropping those from the second half of the year as well. But as far as the breaks and things like that, we're still following the calendar we started with from the school year after, of course, we had to postpone the start of school under the governor's mandate. The one thing that a couple of folks I've been talking to are thinking about, just because of the concern over travel over the holidays, is some schools are considering potentially extending not necessarily the time away, but no in-person after the winter holidays for a week or two. So they just do distance learning for a week or two after the holiday, the Christmas holidays and winter holidays. And the idea there is that families could then do the traveling, see people, come back, everybody would be quarantined, so there wouldn't be a risk. That's something I have sort of in the back of my head that I may talk to folks about, but there's no big change as yet. But that's something that I know some schools are considering.
Tim, I just wanted to thank you. It's been, as you said, a lot of work for you guys, but the kids are just so happy to be back at school, and it's imperative. I mean, today we had our remote day, and it stinks. It's just really hard. It's not the same. Nobody's happy, and it's just so. Thank you. Hats off to Lori, you, everybody. Just thank you. And I will say that though, despite all of this work, the backslide that I'm seeing in my kids, well, and the little ones, it's crazy. And I worry about the overall, what's going to happen to these kids in this cluster of these pandemic kids, because I see it in my own, and it's kind of scary.
Yeah, no, I think we had a faculty meeting today, and we were talking about that, and I think we're all well aware of it. We're trying to figure out how we can work against it. But really what it comes down to is, and I think a lot of folks were right on about this, is the social emotional health and wellness comes first, and then the academic pieces. So them just being together, I think is the piece around the social emotional health and wellness that is really important. And secondarily, we want them to be successful academically. It may be that we have to pick up the pieces now for the next couple of years to really pull that back, because of this whole thing. But once the kids are starting to feel, I mean, it's you have to know education language, but Maslow before Bloom, which is you're getting their basic needs met.
Yeah.
And that's sort of Maslow's philosophy. And then Bloom's is then you get them to higher order thinking and to really more advanced academic work. So if we don't have their basic needs met, we really can't take the next step. So in the midst of what we're dealing with right now, once we get them to the point where they are really comfortable again and happy to be in school, and they clearly are, then we can start to really ramp up the learning again. But that's going to take time.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for having them there. It makes all the difference in the world. They're just so much happier to be in school. So thank you.
My kids too.
Yeah, thanks.
So, one question, the half days you're eliminating, were those in service or were they children in school days?
They were children in school, and then they were in service for half the day with the rest of the faculty.
So is that, has the calendar got adjusted a little bit, right, by the state or not?
So I don't actually, honestly, I don't know where that landed, Ray, in that the state was going to give all the schools.
Right, they're going to give you 5 days or something.
It needs to be a legislative decision.
Yeah.
It's not even the governor who has the authority or the agency of
Yeah.
education. So my understanding is that was going to happen. I have not seen that has occurred, or I have not seen it officially announced anywhere. Maybe I missed it.
Neither have I. I did know that there was talk about it, but I'm unclear about whether the rump legislative session accomplished that.
Yeah, so my understanding is, typically the average number that most of the schools look at is 180, and then it's sort of
Yes.
like once you get below 175, you're really sort of considered at risk. So my understanding is that they were going to jump the 175 down to the 170 mark, so that there still could accommodate random other things that happen to schools.
I think
things like that.
I may be able to find that out by
Okay.
contacting the school board association.
Yep.
Because they had a session on the end of the legislative session, which
Mhm.
I signed up for knowing I wouldn't be able to attend it, but I thought they'd send me the stuff, and they haven't done that, so I'll check with them.
Yeah,
if there's information there.
I'm wondering if it just hasn't happened yet, because I think it would have been a pretty
It would have been noticed in the
important thing
paper.
to- yeah. So I just wonder if the legislature realizes they have plenty of time to make that happen, so they haven't decided to enact it.
They do have an opening session in January, so I would imagine if they haven't done it, they can do it then. And they'll respond to actual circumstances at that point in time. Okay. Well, I appreciate hearing your positivity. And yes, you have a fantastic group of people that work for you. And my heart goes out to the, must be so tough. So are there, I have a question about how the cleaning regime is going. If that's going reasonably well, or what? The
I think
evening cleaning and so forth.
I think it's going really well.
Okay.
The crew we have in there right now is doing really well. I mean, I'll also be honest in that we've asked the instructional staff to assist with that in small ways as well.
Yeah.
So they're putting their trash out in the hallway, their recyclables, their compost, because now compost is happening in all the spaces, those kinds of things to assist with that, and then small cleaning within the spaces they're doing as well. But as far as the overall cleaning and disinfecting of the building, I think we've done a really good job with that. The staff affectionately has a name for the person who comes in the evening and does it, that has hazmat in the name. So
Okay.
so he is coming in the evenings and spraying down the entire building from top to bottom, and that does the last stage of disinfecting each evening. But also luckily, I think what has really come out through a lot of the more recent information is most of it seems to be more airborne versus on surfaces and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's really
Yeah.
about making sure you are providing good airflow and things like that in spaces is really sort of one of the most important pieces. So that'll be the next piece we're crossing. We have some folks from Efficiency Vermont coming in tomorrow to do another analysis of that. But we are dealing with an older space, so really what may end up being our best bet is to open the windows on a regular cycle, whether it's hourly or things like that, as we enter into the colder months. And we may have to start to see pictures of the old schools that were the TB open air schools of the teens and stuff like that in 20s, where the kids are all bundled up and snow is coming through the windows and stuff like that if we want to maintain the air quality in the school. So that'll be a whole other piece that we may have to cross at some point. But I think the cleaning has gone really well overall.
Well, one advantage the building does have is that it doesn't recycle or recirculate any air that flows through back into the building. So at least it's pretty much just what there is, pulls air in and then exhausts it ultimately. Whereas most systems, they pull some air in, but then they're also recycling air within the space through positive ventilation method, which creates some issues for spaces and requires much higher volume of air to pass through to get things out. So most schools are putting HEPA filters or whatever, if they can, on their ventilation systems. It's not really, it would do nothing in our case because it's filtering air that you're exhausting completely out of the building through the roof ventilators on top. Still, we had some CO2 testing back when Ernie LaFontaine was the principal that showed a little elevation in the the afternoon after lunch. So, but that was before we actually installed those ventilators. And I don't think I think we tested after the ventilation was done, but I don't know that I have the information on that. So I don't know where we stand now, except that I don't think we've shown any large propensity to extra illness in the building over what you might expect. So still, it is old. It is an old school system, and I don't know how we would change it, but maybe Efficiency Vermont has some ideas, but they're going to unfortunately be expensive and disruptive at the same time. So I look forward to hearing what they have to say, but I suspect it's going to sound like what I heard from the previous group of people that traipsed through the building. And we'll see. We'll have to talk about it and move forward as we can. It's certainly not going to be something that happens immediately. Although I did hear about on VPR a couple days ago, a couple of health department employees who are tasked with these sorts of tasks were talking about, things that might help. And I heard about something that I actually hadn't heard about, which is using ultraviolet maybe even in a classroom, but you have to orient it toward the ceiling so it doesn't damage people's eyes or skin, but usually positioned in interior, in the ventilation system itself to purify air as it passes through the channel. I've never heard of that before.
Not an inexpensive.
No, it's pretty expensive apparently.
It's used in surgical rooms,
Yeah.
things like that. But
You would be amazed. I get probably I don't know, 25 to 50 emails a day from various filtration companies,
Yeah.
UV light companies, all sorts of things like that, saying that their product will be the answer to all the school's prayers. Yet,
that snake oil.
but
Yeah.
the cost is pretty significant in all those options.
Yeah. No.
Thank you, Jim.
As I say, I'd like to hear what they have to say, and if they have any proposals that have money attached to them. So thank you, Tom, and we'll have you. Well, obviously, you're invited every time we have a meeting to participate if you have the time. And I will try to find out whether they have changed the date, the number of days you have to run for. And so at this point, I think since Mary's here, if Mary would like to speak to the financial reports that we skipped over.
Sure. I'm sitting here in the background, in the dark.
Yeah.
So as the board is already aware, the school district received the state funding very, very late in the month, much later than in previous years, much later than expected. So we did hold off distributing some of the checks for the first week after they were written, and then so as not to impact anybody else because of the state's delay, we took another $100,000, which leaves $50,000 left in the line of credit. And as tax collector, I made a prepayment towards the education taxes collected, remitted it to the graded school district. Normally that does not happen until 20 days after the tax due date. And then as it happened, as soon as that check was in the bank the next day, the state funding came through. But at that point in time, it was all done. Therefore, we are now in good stead to have any other payments made, any other regular payments from now until November. And then the reconciliation, the preliminary reconciliation will take into account that $155,000 already paid. So it was a little unusual, a little, I don't know if you call it unorthodox, but it worked. Everybody got paid.
Well, thank you very much, Mary. I enjoyed working with you to help make that, possible. You did all the work. I just listened to it. But,
Well, thank you. Thank you for all your patience. I know some people did have to wait a little bit.
Yes, I did contact people to tell them when they could expect a check.
Yes.
And hopefully we.
Yes. And they were most
were-
gracious.
They were very gracious. So hopefully that doesn't continue to keep happening, but I'm not certain that we can say there's no risk of it given the state's financial situation at the moment. And the fact that there has been no further stimulus offer from the federal government. So.
I think it's worth pointing out that this was not an issue related to COVID. This was an issue related to Mary having done everything that was had submitted the appropriate things and they lost it.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Is that what happened?
Yeah, I mean, actually, the reports, the tax reports were actually sent to the state on September 1st. I usually don't even get them that soon. We programmed our tax bills 2 weeks earlier than we usually do. So I'm really not sure what happened. Even if I hadn't sent them, there shouldn't be an issue because our grand list is Bennington's grand list. And that has happened from time immemorial. So I never really did get an answer for what happened. And perhaps who knows? But
So,
nevertheless, it's there now.
so that was an issue of the grand list, presentation of the grand list to the
From what I
taxation tax
yes, from
department.
what I understood, the department did not receive or said they did not receive the grand list from North Bennington. And they said they did not receive it as of September 15th. Whereas, point of fact, they had it on September 1st. So my suspicion is that because North Bennington is the same grand list as Bennington, somebody just didn't know. It could be
Right.
new
Could be
personnel, who knows?
inexperience with our
Yeah.
situation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that North Bennington is one of a couple of municipalities in the state that have that same hybrid situation where we pay municipal tax to two entities, and then we also collect education tax from one of the districts that has always been North Bennington graded school district, but physically it's Shaftesbury.
Okay. Well, thank you for handling it as well as you did,
You're welcome.
and I'm glad we're at least in a position to pay our bills for the time being. Till, of course, you'll be receiving more property tax checks, and ultimately there'll be another state support grant payment
Yes.
later in the year, December, is it?
Right.
Yeah.
And the only rub would be if if tax payments are not made as timely as they have been in the past, because there is a requirement to remit those taxes. And if they are not collected, they still have to be remitted. So then that will be the next hurdle to leap across. However, I'm happy to report that residents are making tax payments at the same rate, if not some sooner than they had in previous years. So I am hoping that we will not face a higher delinquency rate than we have historically.
Well, great. You've managed the system or moved it along to the point where that is a pretty great thing that you can say, that people are paying their taxes in a timely way, maybe even faster than they usually do, and you have good expectations for low delinquency rate. I really appreciate your work over.
Yes, and I appreciate
years
our
and
tax,
years here.
and I appreciate our residents for doing so.
Yep, I do too. It's phenomenal, and I think there's nothing else for me to say about this agenda. So, if anyone else has a comment about the proceedings or not, if not, then I guess we'll just adjourn. Yeah, I don't see any comments coming, so I'm just going to say we're adjourned.